Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: World leaders rally behind Palestinian statehood, protests in Slovakia, France and Moldova, push for global defense bank, and babies use DNA from others to avoid genetic disease. Starting with politics, world leaders rally behind Palestinian statehood. President Macron announced that France would recognize Palestine's statehood at a meeting he convened with Saudi Arabia. While the majority of European countries now recognize a Palestinian state, and the EU announced plans to downgrade trade ties with Israel, two of the continent's largest economies, Germany and Italy, have signaled they are unlikely to make such a move soon, while the US boycotted the latest meeting and has told other countries that Palestinian recognition will create more problems. Trump pushed to prosecute opponents. The US president called on the country's top law enforcement official to more aggressively investigate his political adversaries, including a former FBI director, state attorney general, and a Democratic senator. The rival Democrats criticized the call as the path to a dictatorship. Trump is also suing the New York Times and Wall Street Journal for $15 billion and $10 billion, respectively, for defamation and libel. And the Pentagon says it will require credentialed journalists at the military headquarters to sign a pledge to refrain from reporting information that has not been authorized for release, including unclassified information. Protests across Slovakia against economic and pro-Russian policies. Thousands of Slovaks rallied in 16 cities to protest the policies of populist Prime Minister Fico in one of the largest shows of opposition since his return to power last year. In Moldova, authorities said they carried out 250 raids and detained 74 people as part of an investigation into an alleged Russia-backed plan to incite mass riots and destabilize the country ahead of its upcoming election, which many view as a choice between Moldova's continued path toward European Union membership or closer ties with Russia. Clashes and disruption in France amid nationwide protests. More than 250,000 French protesters have staged a day of nationwide demonstrations and strikes in a show of anger over President Macron's austerity policies, causing widespread disruption. In the Netherlands, right-wing demonstrators staged a violent protest ahead of the October 29th general election, but they were condemned by far-right lawmaker Geert Wilders for blocking a highway and attacking police. Saudi Arabia signs mutual defense agreement with Pakistan. It's significantly strengthening a decades-old security partnership a week after Israel's strikes on Qatar, and comes as Gulf Arab states grow increasingly wary about the reliability the US as a security guarantor. India's Supreme Court rejects clauses in Muslim property law. The Waqf Amendment Bill 2025, passed by the BJP-led Indian government, sparked criticism for violating the Muslim community's right to manage religious endowments, such as mosques and schools. While the Supreme Court upheld most of the law, it struck down key provisions, such as the government's decision to classify property as a waqf as unconstitutional. The court also restricted the representation of non-Muslim individuals on waqf boards and emphasized the appointment of Muslim officials to key positions. Moving to stories in conflict. UN report finding of genocide in Gaza. Israel has committed and is continuing to commit genocide in Gaza, according to a UN Commission of Inquiry. Established by the UN Human Rights Council, it concluded that Israeli authorities intended to kill as many Palestinians as possible and have committed the crime against humanity of extermination. It also found Israel deliberately inflicted life-threatening conditions by blocking food, water, and medicine. The inquiry's report follows a 2-year investigation and builds on a growing number of assessments labeling Israel's actions as genocide. Israeli far-right minister suggests real estate bonanza in Gaza. Finance Minister Smotrich said he was talking to the US about how to divide up the war-torn enclave, claiming there was a business plan on the matter sitting on President Trump's desk. "We have done the demolition phase, which is always the first phase of urban renewal. Now we need to build," he said. EU considered drone wall to protect against Russia. EC Defense Minister Kubilius said discussions were still at an initial stage, but he envisioned the project as a mix of sensors and different weapons and jamming systems that would detect and neutralize incoming drones. Meanwhile, Estonia said 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets entered the country's airspace for 12 minutes, with NATO intercepting the aircraft. Protests at Kenyan refugee camp amid US aid cuts. Widespread demonstrations have impacted security at one of the world's largest refugee camps in Kakuma in northwestern Kenya, with police reportedly firing live bullets at the protesters. The protests began over food and water shortages, with residents saying conditions in the camp have deteriorated significantly, with many struggling to access necessities as humanitarian aid has been reduced following funding cuts from the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. ICC charges Duterte with crimes against humanity. Former Philippine President Duterte has been charged with crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. The 80-year-old is accused of being criminally responsible for dozens of murders that allegedly took place as part of his so-called war on drugs, during which thousands of small-time drug dealers, users and others were killed without trial. The ICC said Duterte was an indirect co-perpetrator in the killings, which the court alleges were carried out by others, including police. Here's the latest in economics. Multiple European airports lose service to cyber attack. A cyber attack on a provider of check-in and boarding systems has caused mass disruption at several major European airports, including London's Heathrow, the continent's busiest. Dublin Airport, Brussels Airport, and Berlin Airport were also affected by the attack. The aviation sector saw a 600% increase in cyber attacks from 2024 to 2025. Deutsche Bank backs proposed global defense bank. It has joined JP Morgan, Commerzbank, and ING in supporting the creation of the Defense, Security and Resilience Bank, DSRB, a proposed global state-backed lender designed to raise $137 billion for defense projects. Russia barter trade method to get around Western sanctions. Companies are swapping goods like wheat for cars to avoid Western sanctions and banking restrictions. The Russian government even issued a guide to help businesses use barter, showing how sanctions have forced new ways of trading. This old-fashioned method helps Russia keep trade going despite the tough economic pressure from the West. TikTok deal nears. A deal to divest TikTok's US operations from its Chinese owner ByteDance will meet requirements set out in a 2024 law, a White House official said, adding that investors will include Oracle and private equity firm Silver Lake. African refinery makes first US delivery, reshaping global energy flows. In a significant milestone for global energy markets, Nigeria's large Dangote refinery has successfully exported its first shipment of gasoline to the US, marking a new chapter in Africa's role as an emerging fuel exporter. Now for news in development. Pirate attacks rise in key Southeast Asian shipping lane. There were 95 reported incidents of piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia in the first 6 months of 2025, up 83% on the same period last year. Most crimes were committed in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, which are among the world's busiest shipping lanes. The pirates tend to be low-level opportunists from the remote islands in Indonesia's Riau Islands. Global moves to curb overfishing and protect oceans. The World Trade Organization's Fisheries Subsidies Agreement has taken effect after approval from 112 countries, just above the two-thirds threshold required. It aims to curb the $22 billion in subsidies that drive overfishing and sets up a fish fund to help developing nations comply. Meanwhile, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction (BBNJ) High Seas Treaty reached 60 ratifications, allowing it to enter into force next year. The treaty establishes a framework for creating marine protected areas in international waters, which cover nearly two-thirds of the ocean but remain largely unregulated. New rail link set to transform Asian regional trade. The project involves moving goods from China through Laos into Thailand and onward to Malaysia, enhancing regional supply chains and efficiency. The journey takes less than 14 days, far faster than the 3 weeks often required for sea freight, and could cut logistics costs by as much as 30%. Syria's worst drought in decades leaves millions at risk. The worst drought in 36 years has cut Syria's wheat harvest by around 40%, forcing farmers to abandon crops and pushing millions deeper into poverty. Nearly 14 million people are already food insecure, with about 9.1 million facing acute hunger, and the wheat shortfall this year could leave 16 million people without their yearly dietary needs. Healthy babies born using DNA from others to avoid genetic disease. 8 healthy babies were born in Britain with the help of an experimental technique that uses DNA from 3 people to help mothers avoid passing devastating rare diseases to their children. Finally, our social news: deterioration in workers' rights. In 2025, 87% of countries violated workers' right to strike, a sharp rise from 63% in 2014. The report also reveals that workers were subjected to violence in 40 countries, and trade unionists were murdered in 5 countries this year. These were Cameroon, Colombia, Guatemala, Peru, and South Africa. Monkeys often eat fruit containing alcohol. A study of the alcohol that spider monkeys consume in their fruit-laden diet supports the idea that we inherited our love of alcohol from our primate ancestors. They found that the alcohol concentration in the fruit they consumed was typically between 1 to 2% by volume, a byproduct of natural fermentation by yeasts that eat sugar in ripening fruit. China's temple economy in the spotlight. Buddhist monks who have previously escaped punishment are the latest target of the government's crackdown on excess wealth and alleged corruption. It highlights the increasingly precarious position of influential religious leaders in China, as the official support for the commercialization of religious sites gives way to an emphasis on frugality and political obedience. Russian farmer breaks record with 969 kilograms pumpkin. The man behind the large gourd said it was the result of months of scientific care and precision, starting with using giant seeds and then heating the soil and providing precision nutrition. The giant pumpkin was the highlight of Russia's giant vegetable growing competition, which drew over 3,000 participants from across the country. Discovery of insects trapped in amber sheds light on ancient Amazon rainforest. Scientists have discovered prehistoric insects preserved in amber for the first time in South America, providing a fresh glimpse into life on Earth at a time when flowering plants were just beginning to diversify and spread around the world. Many of the specimens found at a sandstone quarry in Ecuador date to 112 million years ago. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.